Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast, the podcast that passes wisdom to the next generation of athletes, coaches, and parents. And in today's episode, we are interviewing Maren Walseth. Maren is a leadership coach, but also a former Division I athlete, former Division I coach. And in our conversation today, we dive into headfirst into how we can lead ourselves and then also help others lead themselves first so we can transfer that leadership onto the next generation. We also talk about boundaries and making sure that we make enough time to replenish, recharge, and keep giving and keep that giving going. And also the importance and value of a coach to ripple effect throughout our society. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, Maren, and welcome to the Bridging Impact Podcast. I am thrilled for our conversation today to talk about leading ourselves and transferring that leadership onto others and passing that wisdom to the next generation. So welcome to the podcast, Maren.
Thank you, Justin. I'm excited to have a conversation with you and share any nuggets that I can with the listeners.
Absolutely. So I hope our listeners have some notepads out and are ready to take some notes, because I am going to ask you the question that we ask all of our first guests, or all of our guests first, is what is your definition of impactful leadership?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I had to kind of pause to think about it for a minute, because I am a firm believer that everybody's a leader. And if you don't lead anybody else, you have to lead yourself. And so as a college basketball coach, I always wanted to play into that. Like, everybody on your team's a leader in some capacity. And so you can either fight that or you can embrace their influence and make it work for your team. And so when the impactful leadership term came up, I was like, well, everybody's a leader, and therefore everybody can make impact. And you get to choose. Like, I think of impact as like you throw a rock into the lake and then there's that ripple effect that goes out. And so we all have control over how big that ripple effect is based on how we interact. Like, our impact is based on the depth of the relationship, or the depth or the connection of a relationship, or a comment or an interaction. And so to me, impactful leadership is how I interact, how I present, the connections that I build with anybody and everybody. And that ripple effect is going to affect you. It's going to affect those immediately close to me that hear it, or that feel it, or that, that are right there, but also who they touch and who they interact with, and the conversation that they have after, and not even just today, but tomorrow and down the path. So, impactful leadership is powerful, because you don't know where that tsunami is going to stop, right?
I love that. And I think that's part of the reason we have the Bridging Impact Podcast, is to pass that wisdom on to the next person, and then they pass it on to the next person. And again, it is that big ripple effect that becomes a tsunami. So I'd love to take a step back, and you're a leadership coach now. So this is like your jam. This is like a softball question for you, right? I would love to, before you got to a leadership coach, you were an NCAA Division I college basketball player, you're a D1 college basketball coach, and now you're a leadership coach. I'd love for you to share a little bit of your journey to, how you started to understand some of those ripple effects of leadership throughout your career.
Like you said, Justin, I played college basketball at Penn State, had a fantastic experience academically, athletically, socially, best friends, very impactful coaches. So that was phenomenal. And I was fortunate enough to be able to continue playing overseas and in the WNBA. Thank goodness I was cut. I was not going to give up, but my body was not going to hold on much longer. So
yeah.
thank goodness I was cut, and allowed me to get into college coaching. And like you said, I was a college basketball coach for 15 years. And I say that working at 3 different schools over 15 years. And so I say that in that I had a lot of interaction and a lot of impact received. I received a lot of impact from so many different coaches. And, it's cliche to say, well, you learn just as much when you lose as you do when you win, or you learn just as much from bad coaches as you do from good coaches. And, that's cliche to say, but it helps form us. And it does have that ripple effect of like, oh, heck no, I'm not doing that. Or like, wow, that was really cool. I like how I felt after that interaction, or after being in that locker room, or, with that team and on that, experience. And so I feel fortunate to have had a long career in the big picture of things, had a long career of working with coaches as peers, as the player, playing for a coach, as the head coach, working with a staff, and seeing leadership kind of on the other side of, you don't want to be the oxygen tank for the program, but you do need to be the woman or the man with the oars keeping it going. So I appreciate the people that I played for and worked with that kind of prepared me for that head coach role, but then also collectively stepping away from coaching women's basketball to now coaching and working with those coaches, because as we talked a little bit in the open, like, the runway's short, life's tough, and it's not going to get any easier at the high school level, at the summer league, AAU, youth levels, in JUCO, in Division II, and Division I. Like, it's not, we're not going to do an about face and things all of a sudden get easier. We have to build the capacity to handle and to work through what's coming at us. And like I said, leadership, you have to lead yourself before you can lead anybody else. So we have to individually, and then within groups and teams, build that capacity to handle the curveball, or to handle the unwelcomed feedback, or to handle the criticism that goes against everything that you thought you thought the result was one thing, and you get all this feedback that it was something different. And how do you manage and handle that? But you have to lead yourself and be true to who you are to move forward and continue to have that positive impact on others.
I think there's a lot there. And my initial question will be kind of around leading ourselves, right? I'm a big believer in leading ourselves first as well. What does that look like for coach? And it's going to look different for every other coach. But like, when you have a client and you're working with some of these other coaches, like, what are normally the first questions that you ask? Do they pertain to the basketball or the sport they're coaching, or is it sometimes more personal?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're absolutely right. It looks very different for every single person, and I can speak for myself. And for some of the coaches, not all of the coaches, but some of the coaches I work with, leading yourself, to me, is not perfection. It does not mean you have it all figured out. It just means you know what you want to achieve. You know how you want it to end. And so you operate kind of within those guardrails in hopes that, you get the end result that you want. So what do those guardrails look like? What is your morning routine? What are your habits? How do you handle objections or that curveball that happens, in your day? When somebody's late for a meeting, when a partner or a child needs something, at 2:30 in the afternoon, that wasn't on the agenda, right? Like, how do you handle those, those life things that happen? How are you prepared to be yourself in those, less than like planned moments? So habits and boundaries and preparation and knowing how you want to be at the end of the day allows you to give it the best shot you can. And to me, that's leading yourself. I could wake up in the morning and be like, hey, let's see what's going to happen today. Or I could wake up and be like, hey, I want to get these 3 things done in the business. I want to make sure to make contact with these, 4 previous or current clients just to check in. Hey, I want to, do X, Y, and Z, get my own workout in, meal prep, whatever that is. And now it's my habits and my discipline to start plug in through, but also have enough margin in my life that you get that phone call that you're like, hey, I haven't talked to you in, 6 months. Yeah, I got 15 minutes right now. Like, absolutely. And be okay with that and not like, oh, well, here goes the day. Like, I wasn't planned. How do we handle this?
Yeah, what you're saying is making a lot of sense to me, because I struggle and I'm challenged sometimes by those moments where it's that phone call, where it's that appointment, where it's that parking ticket, whatever that extra curveball is in the afternoon. It could be in the morning, right? Like sometimes I do have a structured day, and sometimes I maybe be too rigid. And one thing I'm working on with myself is being a little more fluid, a little more flexible, right? Like, and being able to like, okay, I actually heard a really good kind of saying the other day on the Coach Forward podcast, which is another fantastic podcast with Jesse Mermes. He works for the Orlando Magic, and he talked about, and it's not something I've never thought about before, but the way he said it is like prioritize and maximize. And that's kind of what I almost hear you talking about, is like you're prioritizing, for you right now, what's on your business. For the coaches, right? Prioritize what you have to do today. Parents, all right, what do you have to do today? What are like the top 3 things, right? There's always 4 through 7, that 8 that we would love to do, but let's be honest, we just don't. We don't have the time for them. So how do you help coaches, how do you help coaches like prioritize like great habits for themselves?
Yeah, you brought up a great point that I was having a conversation, not with a client, but a fellow peer in college basketball, and she said, I never get to the bottom of the list, and I get so frustrated. Yeah. And I'm like, well, how about we just cut the list in half and feel good about attaining the list, and maybe you have an extra 30 minutes somewhere at the end of the day. Like, that's not the world's worst thing, right? Like, no. But the mindset then is like, hey, I was productive. This is great. You're ready to go the next day. That was a little side tangent. Sorry. But I think when you were talking about like maximizing and prioritizing, something that came to mind for me was setting yourself up with little quarter breaks. So I'm from the basketball world, right? You and I are in the basketball. We're used to halves or quarters. And how do you just insert that quarter break mid-morning, that halftime break right after lunch, that break between the third and the fourth quarter sometime in the afternoon, to allow yourself to reset, where there's 15 minutes. Maybe it doesn't have to be long, but it's like, I got off schedule, or mentally I'm very flustered by, like you said, the parking ticket or whatever it is. Like, how do I pull myself together for the afternoon or for the evening or for practice that typically for most programs, college, high school, happen in the afternoon or evening?
Right.
How do you allow yourself that space, that margin, that grace to like be a human, but pull yourself together so that you can maximize that next quarter, that next chunk of your day? And I think athletes can learn that. I think parents can learn that. Certainly business owners or, employees, can learn how to be like, hey, time out. Everyone can pull out your phone and put something. That's my favorite with clients is, hey, let's go to Tuesday at 3:30. You've got something to do. Put that in your calendar right now. You're going to get an alert. It's going to go off. You're going to sit there stumped at what you have to do, but it's going to allow you a little time, 15 minutes to reset, collect yourself, reframe your thoughts, and then be the best you can be to maximize, whatever that next quarter of your day entails.
I feel like that's a really interesting way of looking at it. I'm actually reading Win by Daniel Pink right now, and he's talking about the importance of breaks. So I just went through those chapters, and now I have something that I can apply to it, because you are making a good point. Having those scheduled, like end of the first quarter, end of the half, right? And then a quarter, and then some days, right, you're going to have overtime. But you need to sometimes recognize when it's time to use those timeouts, right? And to reset and refresh, and obviously pay that parking ticket when you get it, or whatever that may be. So with that, I'm kind of curious, how do you like for me, I have coworkers that are coaches, and I also work with athletes. So I work with coaches and athletes, and I'm curious, like for me and myself, how can I like help pass that wisdom on how to lead oneself without being like, hey, I know how to lead myself well, so follow me, right? Like, how do I like genuinely kind of like encourage people to start nudging them to lead themselves a little bit more? more in their own like authentic ways?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I think you hit the key word there, in their own authentic way. Because the minute any of us are told this is what you're supposed to do, like immediately there's just like heels in the ground, step on the brake, like, whoa, why are you telling me something? Like, I'm an adult, or I know what I'm doing. I've done this too. And so there is an element of leadership needed to impress or impose that on a coworker or a young athlete, of like, hey, are you happy with yourself right now? Are you, like, if we look back in a year, are you going to be really happy with how you handle that situation, or how you prepare for practices, or how you prepare for the game? And this isn't an accusatory question. It's just, hey, let's just take a step back. Are you really proud and happy? Happy probably isn't the right word. Are you proud of how you prepared for the game today? Are you proud of how you prepared for this meeting? If the answer is yes, great. Now, how can we add to that? How could, like, if that's how you prepared for this practice or this game, like, how can we take that to how you prepared to have a dinner with your grandparents, or how you prepare to, get ready for senior pictures, or, I mean, like, how can we add and make that a positive, like, snowball, right? If you're not, that's okay. Let's talk about it. Like, let's just say, well, what didn't you like? Well, I didn't like, that I felt really tired. Okay, let's make an adjustment. Like, that's okay. And so I think to help them find their authentic way of leading themselves, there's got to be some evaluation. And most of us, not everybody, but most people, most athletes are kinesthetic learners and like to act out or talk because there's action involved. Hence, we like sports. So we can err on the side that many athletes are verbal processors. And so having conversations about, like, hey, what went well? What didn't go well? What are 3 things that you would do differently next time? And next time might be next game, or, literally might not be till next year when we have tryouts, and that's okay too. But helping young people or peers, coworkers, like, evaluate how they feel, how proud are they of how they showed up, and the end result, I believe, allows for you to model leadership, and allows the authenticity to be like, you don't have to do it the way I do it, but let's talk about what works for you, so that they have some ownership in the process.
Yeah, ownership's a big thing that, honestly, I feel like almost every guest I bring on talks about ownership, because I feel like in the past, we haven't always thought about coaching in a way of, like, asking questions, which is the coaching habit, which is on your reading list that I see in the back, that I know, like, changed my life when I was working with first graders. Like, just always asking questions. And that's what you were talking about. You kept being like, are you proud? Not saying I am proud of you for this. Like, I feel like being able to help people learn, and they have to start, I don't want to say the word critically think, but they have to start, verbalizing what is important to them, what makes them proud, what do they need to keep working on, because that's leading themselves. Otherwise, it's coach telling me what to think, what to do, right? And you don't have that ownership over yourself. So with that, I'm curious, how has that, I mean, obviously that book, but also, like, asking questions really helped you become a better coach?
Yeah, that's great. I just chuckle a little bit, because when I took over the program that I took over, I was new, right? And I would ask questions because that's just who I am. Like, why did you make that pass? What were you thinking when you called that play? And every kid was like, whoa, like, why is she asking me? Because so many coaches this is what we do. This is how you go. Like they just tell. And I think in sport, that turns out to be playing like a robot. And I believe that, I mean, again, you and I are basketball folks, but the more you play, you see angles, you see and you feel spacing. And there's just things that when a coach says, hey, why did you throw that pass? Well, it felt like the right pass to throw, which is the absolute right answer. And so because they've figured it out themselves. And so when asking the players that I coached, but also my clients now, why did you respond that way? Why did you say that? Again, it's coming purely from a curiosity place. I am just genuinely, I want to begin to see and understand how you make decisions, your thought process, so that I can adapt to you, you can meet me, and this can be a good thing. But I do think, from my experience, that first probably almost a year, because you go through, like when we're in games and she's asking me these questions again. Oh my God, what's the right answer? No. There's no right or wrong answer, only what you're experiencing and feeling. And I think that helps the ownership. I think that helps retention. I think that helps confidence. I mean, at the end of the day, whether it's high school athletics or college athletics, you want them to be better people when they leave your program. And part of that is ready for that next step. After they're done with high school, you want them to be ready to go onto a college campus or go into another learning environment with confidence. It's your responsibility as a high school coach to help them get there. As a college basketball coach, my responsibility was for them to be prepared to walk into an interview when they left. And like, how do you do that? You have to get them to have confidence in their own voice, to think critically, to be a leader of themselves so that they have perspective, they have thoughts, they have ideas that then make them attractive for a job or, for whatever maybe it's a grad school application or a med school application or, whatever that next step is. And so the question asking purely from curiosity, not from judgment. And that's a fine line that if you don't know, as the speaker, if you don't know, or you have any feelings, it comes out. And so like, that's a challenge for the speaker to, continue with, hey, I'm just curious why you made that play or why you made that call or why you sat at the end of the bench or whatnot. So that there can be dialogue and teaching for them to grow as the young people that they are.
Right. And I'm totally like just resonating with what you're saying, because when I ask, especially older groups questions, sometimes the younger ones, they're just like, they're so young, they're happy to answer, right? But when I ask the older kids questions, they look at me sideways like, you're supposed to be lecturing at me. Why are you asking me questions? And it's like, because I'm curious. What did you get better at today? What was your favorite part of the day? Exactly what you're talking about. What did you see there? Right. And I swear they have like 5 eyes when I ask them those questions. So I'm curious, like, did you get pushback that first year when you started asking questions? And if you did, like, how did you come across? And I feel like the answer is probably a little bit of just like time and like getting to know you a little bit more and like trust you. But like, how did you navigate that pushback, if there was any?
Yeah, I think, each kid was a little bit different.
Right.
I don't feel that I got straight up pushback like, hey, I don't want to answer you. But I got the quizzical, like, is there an ulterior motive here? Why is she really asking me? I'm uncomfortable. Yeah. What's the right answer? And so being very firm with how I wanted to lead our program, I just kept asking questions. I kept reassuring them that there was no right or wrong answer. I'm just curious. If you want to write it down and give it to me, if you want to text me later, like, however you want to communicate your thoughts. Again, there's no right or wrong. I'm just curious. And so it was consistent. It would have been very easy for me to be like, oh, I'm getting resistance. Like, this isn't for these kids. I'll wait till all the kids are here that I've recruited or whatever. But that's silly. Then those other kids are missing out on learning opportunities. But I think the other side of that is also building relationships off the court so that they see you as a mentor, as a person, as somebody who, has flaws and, whatever, maybe she can't cook, maybe she doesn't know how to dance, maybe, but also yeah, we can talk about that Netflix show or there's just other commonalities that they begin to see you as more than just their basketball coach or their sport coach. And now it's oh, they almost fall into it without meaning to, because the title is, taken down a little bit, or they see you with a different, set of lenses of oh, she's really not, because they're changing. You haven't changed. They're changing. Their ears are changing. Their mindset is changing and being, more accepting or more willing to be a little bit uncomfortable because there's a trust factor that you're continuing to build.
Right. And actually the last episode, Mr. B, or Coach B is what he goes by. He was telling me how, that when he's off the court and he's always asking them questions, he's Andy. When he's off the court, he's asking them questions. And it's just that personal connection. It's just he's talking about kind of almost putting down the mask and taking off kind of the title that you're talking about, just being a human with them and building those relationships, because that's that trust that is required to, then teach those life lessons and probably those challenging moments where you have to hold, a player accountable, so you can therefore prepare them for post basketball, post football, post whatever sport it is, because the best players in the world don't play forever. They don't. Even Michael Jordan's retired. Everyone's retired. Everyone does something after sports. Father time always wins. You can't play forever, right? Yeah. So I think those life skills are so important.
I agree. I agree. And as a basketball coach, I always thought I am choosing basketball as the platform, but my responsibility is to prepare these young women for whatever's next. Someone on to another degree, someone into the workforce, some got married and had kids right away. Whatever that role or whatever that responsibility is, someone in the military, it's hey, I got to help them get them prepared. And the fun part was I have no idea where they're going or what they're doing. And in any given year, you've got, 12 different potentials. So it's hey, I got to cast a wide net and make sure they are prepared for any number of things, not just everybody goes to grad school or everybody joins the workforce or everybody plays overseas or, which I think makes us as leaders, keeps us on our toes and keeps us always learning and perfecting ourselves as well.
And it's the fun part, because I'm curious, how cool is it to see, now that you've coached for 15 years in the college world, you probably have quite a few students that have graduated. How cool is it to see your athletes and players grow and go on and go out into the world to do their thing?
I think it's fantastic, and they were all different individuals and different athletes and different people when they were on the teams I was a part of. And they're still, very individual. But yeah, there's a kid that's still playing overseas that I would have never in a million years thought would last more than a season, and she's thriving. She's having a great time. I was just back this spring at a wedding of a player who just graduated a couple of years ago, and she's a school teacher and, loves it. And, it's neat seeing players continuing to live out their passions, with whatever that is.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think my next question will be around it requires a lot of effort and energy and attention to, invest into these athletes and our players and our teams. And in our last podcast conversation, we talked a little bit about balance, and you talked a little bit about boundaries earlier in the podcast. I'm curious, how you have probably learned from your experience around, kind of setting boundaries between, because clearly you're a coach that's curious and you care. And sometimes, those conversations outside of practice, right, where you're just Maren or you're just coach or you're just Justin, you're not even coach, right? They sometimes expand, but you want to make sure you make time for the people that are closest to you, of course, and honestly making time for yourself. So how do you set those boundaries?
Yeah. I think boundaries sometimes comes with like a negative connotation, like they're harsh and they're bad. And if I set a boundary, like people aren't going to like me because like that's a no-no. When in reality, when you learn the skill of boundary setting, you are so much more free. And you have so much more margin in your life, and your emotional tank is much higher. I also think that people think boundaries have to be like set in stone forever, where you can have boundaries around certain aspects of your life: finances, nutrition, exercise, family time. You know, I mean, like you can have boundaries around anything. Your boundaries can always change. If they're not working, reestablish them. So I think setting boundaries and aiming for something that's just a little bit harsher than you want is always the way to go. And you can always pull it back a little bit, but once you establish it, it's really hard to be like, no, actually, that happened. That boundary goes to Sunday too. And people are like, what? You know, where it's like, just put it to Sunday and you can always move it back to Saturday once you get comfortable. But I think maybe the more important thing to talk about, because you started that question with coaches give so much. How do they fill their tank? And that is something that I talk about with all of my clients all the time. When's your next vacation? It doesn't have to be 10 days. It can be 3 hours. When's the next time you're doing something just for you? Where's your energy level? How's that going to get filled? What do you know, how are you going to unplug? How are you going to recharge? And that's like a mindset, because in competitive athletics, it's almost like a thing of pride. If we work really hard and we're super tired, that means like we gave it our, like, we're strong and we gave it our best effort and this is our reward, being fatigued. Really? Is that, I mean, there's some truth to that, but is that how you want to live your life? So talking with clients or talking with athletes or parents, like thinking about the longevity, there needs to be self-care. Some people think that's a fluffy word, and that means that the ladies go to the spa and get their toenails painted. If that's what you want to believe, go right ahead and believe it. But I will tell you that my self-care includes massages, sitting outside and reading, turning off my phone, sleeping in one day on a Saturday, like once a month, just deciding like this is going to happen, to fill my cup so that I can be available for my clients, like in my life now, for my clients when they need me. In a coach's world, that's going to look different in season, out of season, game day, practice. You know, as a basketball coach, like game days, those were like the best days. There wasn't a ton of prep left. Like you might want to review some things, but there wasn't a ton of prep left. Kids didn't have to get taped and all that early in the day. Like they showed up for the game. You had a walkthrough and whatnot. But my mornings at least, I set them up to be very free. I got my own workout in. I did a few things around the house. Maybe I ran a couple errands. Certainly got to the office by noon or, like early in the day to get things accomplished. But it wasn't this like, it's game day. No, it's game day. It's game day. Like, let's enjoy the game and let's recharge myself in the process. And so again, I think that looks different for everybody. It's going to look different even year to year for the same person. It's certainly, like my self-care and my margin, year one of taking over a Division I basketball program, I know I didn't start watching film until I got home at night. Because there was like decisions that needed to be made, people that needed to be met, relationships that needed to be fostered. Absolutely. Did it all willingly. And then there was like a switch in like year 3 that I was like, am I watching film during the day? This is weird. I had just gotten better at parts of my job and I was able to, pour into myself and recharge myself differently in that part of my career. So it's different from person to person. It's different in season out. It's different from year to year. But it's so needed. I can't emphasize to my clients enough. Even just people I see out, when I go to recruiting events or, I'm on a college campus, I'm like, hey, when are you going to get on vacation? Oh, well, there's a recruiting shutdown. It's in August. Yeah, it's June. When are you going to take a day? When are you going to take half a day for yourself? You live in Washington, D.C. When are you going to go to a concert? When are you going to go to an outdoor park? When are you going to go see a sporting event? Like, when are you going to do something that you're not coach and you're able to just be yourself?
I think there's a lot of wisdom there that ties into kind of what we were talking about earlier with breaks and between quarters, right? That's like kind of like the maintenance breaks. But I feel like what you're talking about here right now is that when the game is over or on practice days or on your days off, how are you recharging? For me, you're right. It does look different. Like when I lived in Eugene, Oregon and was surrounded by, rivers and trees, like it looked different. There's a lot more nature there. Between now I'm in Los Angeles, like a big metropolitan city. It takes a little bit longer to do some of the things that I used to like doing. So I've had to adjust kind of my I guess my self-care routine. And with that, it's also like I've been really trying to be better. Actually, I've gotten worse, but I want to start getting better at the phone. The phone is like, I'm really trying to go, like I just moved to a little safer neighborhood in LA. So bless up on that and trying to take walks where I don't have a phone. And it's just like, it's been very, very like freeing for me. I think, for me and honestly, a lot of people, and I honestly, I feel like for athletes, and this is hopefully what I'm going to bring, because I didn't mention this to you before, but I'm going to be coaching the Venice Frost Off boys basketball team. And so, I feel like obviously I'm all of us honestly are so glued to our phones that like taking phone breaks are super necessary. And I'm a content creator. So like to me, sometimes my brain like seeing my phone signals work, right? So it's unplugging, whether it's coaching, whether it's, you're a content creator. I kind of digress there, but just the value of taking breaks is so important for us to continue to give and serve at a high level.
Absolutely, because that's what started this whole part of the conversation, right? Was how do we as leaders who give our time and our emotions and our energy, how do we, one of my favorite terms is, how do you budget your energy? People are like, I budget my finances. Like, yeah, but you need to budget your energy as well. Because you can't burn it all out on one kid. You can't burn it all out on the first 3 days of the week. How do you budget your emotions and your energy?
That's a really good point. And like, the last thing I'll say about this is I had a conversation with someone that talked about, obviously we know the filling of the cup, right? But there's only so many cups we can fill into, right? Like we have to have our priorities, right? So if I have a cup and it's full, I filled it up. But I'm like pouring it a lot here and a lot here and a lot here, and then it's empty, right? So I have to re-pour into the cup, or there's people are just going to be getting little drips, and when I'm at practice, I'm going to be super tired. So just I really like the budgeting energy and making sure that there's enough water or whichever kind of like metaphor kind of sticks with people to get them to serve and protect their time. Because at the end of the day, I'm curious, for you, like, why do you coach, and what do you think is what is a coach to you?
I'm going to take the definition that I heard from Lindsay Wilson, who's a mindset coach with Positive Performance. She's a former Division I basketball player at Iowa State and played professionally overseas, and just somebody from the entrepreneurial world and the coaching world that I really enjoy and I look up to. And she said, a coach is a benefit, and it's a guide and a Sherpa. Why would you not want one?
Right.
Like, you want to get better at playing basketball, you're going to join a team because there's a coach who's going to help you. You could go to the Y and just goof around, or you could join a team or try out for a team because you believe that team, the program, the culture, the coach, led by the coach, is going to help you. And so whether you're hiring a nutrition coach or a fitness coach because, you want to be better in the weight room or improve your cardiovascular, or whatever that looks like for you, or a leadership coach or an executive coach or a life coach or a business coach. I run a business. I'm a business coach. Like, if you will help me run my business, sign me up. I will. Yes, I don't know. I was a basketball player and a basketball coach. I don't know how to run a business, but I will work with somebody because I value that. I want to get better at it. And so I think some people think there's something has to be wrong to hire a coach or to work with a coach. Where if that's what you believe, fine, but I'd like to challenge you. Nothing has to be wrong. Like, what if you're operating at like a 9, but you want to operate at 10? You deserve to operate at a 10. Working with, again, a finance coach, a business coach, a leadership coach, a life coach to help you get to what you can be. I call that being an active participant in your own life. And that has been my mantra and my motto for as long as since college. But, whether I'm working with my student athletes when I was a basketball coach, or just joking around with my friends or my family, or working with my clients, it's like, you can complain about it, you can wish it was different, or you can be an active participant in your own life and make a decision to make a change. So to me, that's where, when the thought is be an active participant in your own life, hire a coach. Go ask for help. Go out and start walking. Then maybe you'll start running. Then maybe you'll get in the fitness shape, the fitness level that you aspire to. Or be an active participant in your own life. You don't like sitting at the end of the bench? What are you going to do about it? Get with the JV coach, get with the high school coach, ask how you can get better. Spend time in the weight room, be out in your driveway, whatever that looks like, but be an active participant in your own life. And there are so many people wanting to help others, wanting to help high school kids, college kids, adults, parents. There are so many people wanting to share their expertise, share their struggles so that you don't have to go through it the exact same way.
And I love that for being a coach, right? Both of us are coaches in our own different worlds, right? But that's that ripple effect that you were talking about at the very beginning, because when you have a coach, whether it's a fitness coach, a business coach, a life coach, a basketball coach, they help you improve at the skills that you want to go to, right? They're that guide. And I feel like one of the things I heard you talking about, and I was thinking about for previous coaches, because I'm always trying to imagine and picture and put places. It's I feel like I've had so many great coaches that have helped me. And honestly, my parents, I'm going to lump them in as coaches, and my grandparents, because I feel like they're the ultimate coaches because they have so much influence on you, that they have done such a good job coaching me that I understand, what I need to do to get better. Let's say for me as a basketball player, when they're not around, right? Because I had so many good coaches, and now I really know what I need to do, and I'm self-disciplined, and I learned that from those other great coaches. They're teaching me about pushing yourself. Don't be in your comfort zone. And I think that's that kind of ripple effect that a coach can have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I loved what you said about parents being the ultimate coach. I find myself when speaking or when content creating, like you said, I do a lot of that as well. I can be talking to a coach in relation to how they interact with their team. But mom, dad, how are you interacting with your little teammates? Those little people that operate in your household that may or may not have siblings. How are they being good teammates? How are they improving their skills? How are you building trust with them? I did not think of parents as coaches until I stepped into this role as a leadership coach. Now I'm seeing it more and more of while you're leading your team, you can lead that team at home just the same.
Right. Yeah. And that's goes back to your very first point of we are all leaders. So with that being said, as our conversation is nearing the end, what is your final piece of advice for coaches, and where can coaches connect with you and find your resources? Because she's got some great reading lists that I am going to selfishly go look at and add some things to the cart.
Yeah. Well, I guess first of all, my website is my name, MarenWalseth.com. That's what I am on social media as well. So very easy to find me there. But I would just leave our listeners with the idea that leadership is always a journey, and we are all always a work in progress. I think that can be a barrier for some, like, well, I don't want to be a leader because I don't think I'll ever get it. No, you'll always get it because you're always leading yourself. And I firmly believe that people want to improve, people want to get better, people want to meet expectations. And so when you step into a leadership role and believe that you can lead yourself to your goals, to something better, to something bigger, that snowball starts, that ripple effect. And then, like any habit that we have, it starts and you're like, oh, I want to do this again. I want to get better. Like, you get that endorphin rush of like, oh, hey, this feels pretty cool. Like, I'm liking where I'm going. But it starts with yourself.
It all begins with yourself, and then you're able to transfer it to others and pass it to the next generation. Maren, I thank you so much for your time today. You were a wonderful guest. Again, I got so many notes right here that I'm going to start applying to my own life and with my athletes and coaches as well.
Thank you, Justin. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.